Hello dear students, welcome to our video lecture on the discipline specialized course for scientific research purposes of foreign language. And it's me, Qualitative. Today's theme is analyzing the data and quantitative and qualitative research. Today we will talk about analysis of the collective materials using modern methods of research. As you know, the goal of an empirical study is to answer research questions through observation or experimentation. Empirical studies can be quantitative or qualitative, if you see. And it is important to understand the difference. In this presentation, we will explore characteristics of quantitative and qualitative scholar articles in order to understand these different approaches in research. Let's start by comparing the goals of quantitative and qualitative approaches. Okay, when you think quantitative, think experimental and statistical. The goal here is to measure, to test, predict, and describe using statistics. If you conduct a statistical analysis of the correlation between a child's participation in a Head Start program and their likelihood of going to college, you're talking a quantitative approach, for example. But if you go into preschool classroom, for example, preschool classroom, observe children playing and conduct open-ended interviews with children and teachers about classroom behaviors, you're taking a qualitative approach. Qualitative approach are nature realistic and interpretive. You might hear terms like ethnographic or phenomenological to describe qualitative research. The goal here is to richly describe people's behavior and reality rather than to quantify or measure them. Since the goals of quantitative and qualitative studies are different, their methods and data are different too. A quantitative study might be used experiment, surveys, questionnaires, analysis, or large data sets like USA cancer data or structured interviews or observations where questions and observation criteria are exactly the same for each participant. Data in quantitative study is numerical in the first place or quantifiable. The qualitative study might use field research case studies or more open-ended interviews and observations where there is more room for flexibility and follow-up. The data in qualitative study might be interview or focus group transcripts, notes or journal entries, because methods are different. Data analysis techniques also vary between quantitative and qualitative studies. Quantitative studies will feature statistical analysis, while qualitative studies might use text analysis and coding for themes in order to interpret data. While you probably see more numbers, charts and graphs, for example, in a quantitative study, be careful. Just because you see this doesn't automatically mean the study is quantitative. Qualitative studies might report basic demographic information numerically before diving into qualitative analysis. So it is also important to read the study for additional information. Let's take a look at some examples. For example, you see some examples. This is articles. Yes, here are 3 studies about adolescent mental health. We will focus on their goals, method, data, and data analysis technique to determine if they are quantitative or qualitative. Our first study is about depression in female adolescents. According to the article, the goal of this exploratory study was to gain an understanding of female adolescents' own experience of depression and give voice to their experiences. The method for doing this was 6 open-ended interviews regarding participant experiences of depression. The data consisted of interview transcripts, and the article includes quotes from the interviews. The data analysis techniques was interpreted phenomenological analysis, in which researchers distilled themes from the interview transcripts. Okay, there is another example of qualitative study. Our second example is about sleep issues as a risk factor for suicidal behavior in depressed children and adolescents. According to the article, the goal of the study was to investigate the association between sleep complaints and suicidal behavior. In this population, the method of doing this was through a structured interview about sleep. The same question for every participant plus 2 tests, the Children's Depression Rating Scale and the Children's Global Assessment Scale. The data consisted of frequency of sleep issues from the interview as well as numerical score. For these 2 scales, the researchers used statistical analysis to analyze the data and presenting the information about correlation between variables using tables. Okay, this is another example of a quantitative study. Our last example is about self-labeling among adolescents with mental disorders, or the impact of mental illness labels on teens' psychological well-being. According to the article, the goal of this study was to investigate association between self-labeling and perceived negative treatment by other clinical and demographic factors. The researcher had the hypothesis that many teens wouldn't self-label, and those they did would have worse psychological well-being. The researcher combined the method to test their hypothesis that they did semi-structured interviews with some open-ended questions where teens could express their thoughts and emotions. They also used rating scales to quantify teens' experiences like Rosenberg self-esteem scale and clinical information about each patient like their type of disorder and age of first treatment for mental health issues. The data in this case consisted of interview transcripts, scores from the scales, and clinical information. Because researchers combined 2 methods, they also needed to use several data analysis techniques. The researcher used textual analysis to find the themes in the interview transcript, and they ran statistical analysis for relationship between the variables on the scales and the clinical information. These articles include quotes from the teens as well as statistical tables. Because this study uses both qualitative and quantitative methods, we will call it mixed method study. So what makes it better? Empirical study. Quantitative studies aren't automatically better or worse than qualitative studies. These 2 approaches are just different. Sometimes researchers even combine approaches to present a fuller picture through a mixed method study. When you are evaluating a study's approach, ask yourself, how well do the methods and analysis fit the research questions? And I hope I could explain to you about the difference between quantitative and qualitative research. And which is better, it's up to you. Okay, thank you, and thank you for participating and watching this video. Hopefully we will see on the next lecture. Thank you, goodbye.